Welcome to this installment of the Division G webinar series, launched in 2014 by the AERA Graduate Student Executive Committee. These conversations highlight scholarship, discuss contemporary issues, and connect Div G members with their greater educational community. For an archive of our previous webinars, please visit the AERA Division G YouTube channel. Also, be sure to join our Facebook group, AERA Division G Students, and follow us on Twitter at AERA Div G. We will be live tweeting, and our webinar hashtag is DivGChat. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Isha Price. I am a second-year doc student at Rowan University and also a member of the Grad Student Executive Committee, specifically Campus Liaisons. Woohoo! Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Shana Sanchez, Eric Ambroso, and Jeremiah Sadaraka. They will discuss how to prepare for your talk, presentation logistics, and things to consider with each specific session at AERA. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to begin with our guest answering a few questions before we open it up to the audience. If you have a specific question, please type it into the Zoom chat box below. And when we get a chance, if there is time, we will ask each participant the questions that you have. Also, in the chat box, you can find the link to our PowerPoint for this session. If you would like, you can click on that link and follow along, okay? So we're gonna start with our participants introducing themselves. They're gonna start with their name, their institutions, specialization, and role that they play on the graduate committee.
Thank you, Isha, for that awesome introduction. I'll go first. My name is Shana Sanchez, and I am a doctoral candidate at the School of Ed at UCLA, and I am also the senior rep for the Div G Executive Student Committee.
Hey, Shana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremiah, and as of 2 days ago, I'm officially a doctoral candidate. What? Representing here at Washington State University in Washington State. My degree is in cultural studies and social thought and education, and specifically research interests are around critical race theory, oceanic critical race theory, so kind of conceptualizing what that could look like, and then anything to do with educational equity, social justice, and K-12 education. And then my role on the graduate committee is I'm part of the campus liaison subcommittee.
Hi everyone, I'm Eric Ambroso, and I'm a doctoral candidate at Arizona State University. This is my second year on the Div G Graduate Student Executive Committee, and this year, along with Jeremiah and Isha, I'm part of the Campus Liaison Subcommittee. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. So we are going to start with our first question being, can you give us just a general overview of the AERA conference?
Yeah, I can start with that. So this AERA will be my, I'm going into my 5th AERA. So I have a few AERAs under the belt, and I find that depending on the city, it can be a very different experience, you know, year to year. But generally, the structure is that a bunch of people come into a city for like 4 days, and usually they have sessions just depending on the layout of the city in different hotels or a big convention center, which is really nice. And you know, there are a lot of different opportunities and sessions that it can be pretty overwhelming. So they usually have this app that's like really great, and you can use it to find the scholars you want to go see speak, the topics that you want to be you know, in discussing with. And so so I find that the app is very helpful. They also give you a really big book, but really they do a really nice job of like organizing everything around themes, around the different SIGs, and around the different divisions. So it's good to kind of know like, oh, which division or which SIG am I really interested in, and maybe start there if you're feeling like you just need like a bigger pool of options. And yeah, and lots of opportunities to socialize and network and, you know, all that good stuff. And then of course to showcase and present your work and to, you know, be seen by your colleagues and other scholars who might be doing similar work with you or as you, or you might be interested in, you know, collaborating with. So really is like a place that's just full of opportunity, no matter what it is that you're looking for. And, you know, it's our one big like get together, our one big like scholarly, you know, like showcase in the year. And so it's very exciting in those terms.
Thank you, Shannon.
And I can add to that a little bit. If you haven't been to AERA before, it can be very overwhelming. It's huge. So I would definitely think about looking into either a division or a SIG that you're interested in, if you're interested in making connections with different scholars there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to tag on to that. I think just the massiveness of AERA can be overwhelming. So last year was my first time at AERA. And so there's even a lot of buildup just to even put a proposal together. And then you're anticipating whether or not you're getting accepted. And then once you get accepted, I think some of the things that I thought about was funding, because these aren't cheap. You know, hotels aren't cheap, transportation, flying, all that is pretty expensive. So finding the funding, that was pretty big for me. And then, you know, what Eric and Shane have said, I think finding the division or SIG, so special interest groups that you think you might be interested in, is going to be really important, especially for those that, you know, if this is your first time here, I think finding those areas are going to be really important. It was for me. I met some really great people in the SIG. So the SIG that I'm involved with is the Indigenous Peoples of the Pacific. And I found really great scholars in that group. And so I think, you know, that's where I've found my community, because thousands of people coming together it's a lot. But I think finding your interest groups and where you want to connect with, who you want to connect with, is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jeremiah. Can you guys also give us some information about what is your specific or personal experience with presenting at AERA?
I can jump in first. So this will be my fourth AERA. 2 years ago, I presented a roundtable session. And last year I had another roundtable and 3 paper sessions. And this year, I'm part of a symposium that was accepted. So I'll present a paper in that and two other paper sessions.
So very similar to Eric, coming up on my 5th year, I've done a number of paper sessions. I've also done a symposium, which is basically a paper session that you submit, you know, as a group all together, and there's a theme and you've already kind of predetermined what it is. I've done roundtables. The one thing I have not done is a poster session, but I've done poster sessions in other conferences, and I've attended the poster session showcase every year at AERA, and it's always just really cool, and I learn a lot. And yeah. Oh, and I've done, like, you know, I've also done our DivG, like our fireside chats and pre-con and kind of those things that are not in your like typical kind of things that you submit for.
Yeah, same here. Last year did a roundtable and then a paper session.
Okay, thank you. All right, so getting specifically into talking about the different types of sessions, can you tell us about the general format for these different types of sessions? And for those of you following along on the PowerPoint, this information can be found on slide 12 through 14.
The poster sessions are generally 90-minute sessions, and they're in huge halls. So there will be like many lines of people presenting posters. Generally, you'll be facing another line. So the audience will just walk through the posters. And I don't know, what I've typically done is I walk through, unless there's a specific poster I want to see, I walk through the lines, and whatever catches my eye, I stop at. And then I'll have a discussion with the person presenting. So a couple of things to consider if you do have a poster session is that in previous years, AERA didn't provide clips for your poster. They had push pins, but if you want to, save your poster and use it at a later conference, then I would suggest getting some clips so you can clip your poster onto the cardboard in the back. So every presenter will have a station. So you'll be given a number, and you'll go to that station where your cardboard will be, and you'll just have to clip your poster onto the cardboard. Let's see. And then, as people come up to you, you'll have individual informal discussions about your work. You can present it in any way possible. But, one recommendation for design, I would try to make the design of your poster very visually appealing. I know personally, when I walk through the poster hall, I stop at things that catch my eye. And if your poster is just all text, I find that difficult. A lot of people also put QR codes on their posters. So if you want people to be able to link to your CV, your contact information, or the full study itself, you can put a QR code and people will be able to do that.
Thank you, Eric. Shannon, can you talk about the paper session?
Yes, happy to. So paper sessions are generally it's generally like in a panel style, and you have probably, I want to say, between 3 to 5 speakers, no more than 5 usually, sometimes 4 I think is about the average. You have a chair and a discussant. Sometimes they're one and the same, sometimes they're 2 separate people. And those folks just kind of facilitate the conversation, moderate the discussion with the audience and that sort of thing. And so you go up there and you have about, depending on, again, how many people are on the panel, it's a 90-minute session, as most of these sessions usually are. And so you'll have about, between 10 to 20 minutes to give your kind of like spiel, give a PowerPoint presentation if you want, and to kind of run through the, outline of your paper. One really good tip that I received that I, to this day, still implement when I'm giving any kind of paper talk is to kind of very quickly go over your, your frameworks, your conceptual theoretical frameworks, your methodology and all that stuff, and really take the time to get to the nitty gritty, the good stuff. And the good stuff is your findings. It's what did you find in this study, and what do you have to share to push the knowledge forward? And so make sure that you're very deliberate. I think it's really good to sit down and do as best as you can to be very concise in the very beginning about this is the framework I use, these are my methods, these are how many participants I had, and this is when data collection took place. Boom, done. Now I want to tell you about the findings. This is what I found, and really try to share, if you're doing quant work, try to share a lot of visuals in terms of graphs and charts and all that stuff. If you're doing qualitative work, it really helps to have the vignette pulled up or the artifact pulled up that's labeled or coded in the way that you've coded it, just to show how you're synthesizing the work. And so so for me, I think that's one of the best tips I've gotten in terms of presenting at paper sessions. And then at the end, they'll open it up to Q&A, and I'll save my kind of tips for Q&A, but for the actual part when we talk about tips. But yeah, so then the audience has an opportunity to ask you questions, and for even you to ask the other panelists questions as well. That's also is allowed usually. yeah, and so that's the general format.
Thank you, Shana. So Jeremiah, can you talk to us a little bit about the roundtable?
Yeah, so roundtable sessions, I think they're pretty fun. They're not as formal as the paper sessions. And so each table will have about 3 to 5 researchers of accepted papers clustered around a shared interest. And each roundtable at a roundtable session is going to have a chair who's knowledgeable about the research area, and then the chair is going to facilitate kind of the interaction between participants and the papers that are presented. Because the emphasis is on interaction, there's no discussants. So it's just the chair and then the 3 to 5 papers. And then each roundtable session is scheduled for 90 minutes. And then each roundtable session will have about 15 roundtables. So that's kind of the general format. The room setup is usually in a big, large room. And the tables are arranged to kind of maximize discussion and interaction. So it's a round table, and you sit around this table and you talk to each other about what you found. There's no audio or visual equipment that's provided for these roundtable sessions. And so usually if you wanted to show something, you would bring a laptop and just make sure your laptop is charged, because sometimes people forget about that part. But yeah, if you wanted to, it's really informal, but also a great time to exchange ideas and get to know each other through a shared interest. So that's kind of the general format of a roundtable.
Thank you, Jeremiah. So our next question is around, I guess, the preparation and the recommendation and suggested timeline for each of those sessions that you guys just spoke to. So if we can go back to the poster session, Eric, can you tell us a little bit about what is the recommendation for preparing for a poster, and what is the timeline that we need to consider in our preparation for it?
So there are so many different printing companies that you can use to print posters. I don't know, my university, ASU, has a printing lab that we can use. Generally, it takes about a week to get a good poster made. I kind of went through some of those tips before, but again, I would just recommend making your poster design visually appealing. So not so text heavy, so it catches people's eye. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Posters are pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And if there's one thing just about roundtables too, roundtables are awesome to attend, because if you're really interested in meeting someone, if there's someone you want to speak to, it's a good way to sit next to someone and have personal communication with that scholar.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for jumping in on the roundtable discussion. Please, if you guys have any other comments you want to offer about any of the sessions, please feel like you can. What about the paper session? Go ahead, Shana.
I do have something to add to the poster that I think Eric brought up a really good point about getting your poster printed. I found in the past that sometimes printing can be very cost prohibitive. It's pretty expensive, depending on where you go to print a poster. So just be mindful of, does your university have funds you can tap into to ask to get a poster printed? Because usually once you print that poster, you can only present it at one conference, because like you're only allowed to present your paper at one time at one conference. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So same thing goes for the poster. And so the reusability in terms of conference is not really there. So just being thoughtful about like what you put on there, and also like the cost of it. And then also transporting it is another thing to think about, because like a lot of folks travel, and transporting a poster can be a huge pain, because you got to roll it up, you got to make sure it's not bent, and then you got to get that tube, and you got to bring it on the plane, or however you're getting there. So just thinking about all these like kind of like general logistics around poster. I find that some people have printed their poster at like the city that they're going to avoid like having to, but then you take that risk of like, what if something happens and it's not quite ready the day that I'm presenting, so a lot of considerations, I think, in terms of like logistics of poster. Again, none of this is like the final word on posters, but just things that are good to think about is the cost and just transporting.
Can I jump in, Shana, and just add some other ideas that I have seen is that people have printed their poster, if you will, on a blanket. So instead of having to roll it up, they just fold it into their luggage and then hang it, of course.
I love that.
And it, right? Creative. In addition to, I know people who have mailed their posters ahead of time to the hotel that they were staying at. So that's a possibility as well, too.
Yeah.
So Shana, you gave us a lot of information about the paper session earlier. Do you want to talk through the timeline a little bit more specifically?
Yeah, I find with the paper, so, and somebody said, I can't remember, it said something about the paper session being a little bit more formal than the other two. And yeah, in general it is. And not like you are not going to be prepared for the other two as well as you're going to be prepared for the paper session, but there is a little bit of more, like just a higher level of preparation, I think, that comes with paper session, because you're up there and you have an audience. Like usually the room, depending on how big it is, can fill up. It can be between 30, 60, 90, it depends on really the interest level of that session. I've been in a room with 7 people, and I've been in a room with 60 people. So it really can vary, but my mindset is always, you go in, and even if there's one person in that room, you present as if there's 100 people in that room. You honor that person's time, and you honor just the moment, and also the work you put into presenting your research. So just having that mentality will help you prepare, I think, for that. And so with timeline, so we got acceptances in November. Usually around this time, I'm, still in the middle of everything that you're wrapping up the year, I guess. And so it's not until January that I'm really thinking to myself, okay, how can I, get my presentation ready? And so going back to that paper, if it's still, in outline form, if it's a manuscript, just depending, I've had, I think, papers in different stages. I've had papers where it's a really fully fleshed out outline, but it hasn't been completely written in draft form. And so I work on writing it. I've had papers where it's it's pretty much done and I just have to present it. I've had papers where I needed major revisions because I got, feedback from my mentors, my advisors, and that sort of thing. So just revisiting your work, or really going back and writing it. I think it's important to write the paper, because that's where your presentation is going to come out of. And then in March, you'll have the opportunity. Well, I think you have the opportunity now. I'm sorry, I don't really know for sure, but there's a repository and you can upload. So if anybody knows the exact details of this, you can upload your paper to that, and your discussant or your chair, will read it and that sort of thing, and to just kind of better prepare them for the session with you. Yeah, so, and then just practicing a lot, because in these sessions, you're usually up there. I know in the beginning, I did not like speaking into a microphone, but there is always a microphone in these rooms. And so I've just had to get used to it. And when you go in to present also, don't ask to not use the microphone. Use the microphone, because there's also accessibility, considerations around using the microphone, making sure everybody can hear. And so, yeah, so make sure that you're comfortable hearing your own voice, or at the very least, okay with it, using the microphone, and practicing your presentation, going through it a few times always helps with the nerves and anticipating questions, and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Shana. So the next session is about the roundtable, specifically Jeremiah. Tips and, well, not tips, but information about the timeline and recommendations for preparing for your session.
Yeah, I think Shayna covered a lot of it. I'd say still make sure that you write out and you get feedback and you practice what you're going to talk about. I think, it's not as formal as a paper session, but it's still really important, right? You've been accepted into this space, and you'll be with other scholars. And so I think you still need to be prepared. You still want to know what you're talking about. Usually it's up to the chair to decide how much time you get. So because there's anywhere from 3 to 5, papers that are going to be presented in this 90-minute time frame. You might have anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to present, and then there's room for questions at the end. For the session that I did last year, we had 4 papers, and each of us had about 15 minutes to present, and then that left kind of 30 minutes to questions. So it really, it depends on the chair to decide how much time each presenter is going to get in these roundtable sessions. And I would say, so for us, for the paper that I presented, there were six folks that were involved in this research that we were presenting. So it was 2 faculty and then 4 grad students, but only 2 of us presented. So a lot of the prep work had already been done, and so it was a matter of me and the other grad student walking through like what exactly we wanted to say, like what were our main key points, and how we wanted to present this information, if we wanted to bring a laptop or not. We ultimately decided not to bring anything, but we printed out our papers, and just we had notes on there, and that's how we presented. Others in the roundtable session had a visual on their laptop, so I think it's really up to you. I think one of the biggest tips that I got was know where you are presenting and try to find those places before you actually present, because it's so big and they're located at a lot of different hotels. Being able to identify where exactly you're going, what date and what time is going to be important. And that information comes later. So I think, Shayna, do you know when? It's usually like a month before the conference.
Yeah.
That you find out about when and where you're going to be presenting. But I think once you get there and you have that information, you'll want to know where, and actually walk to those places if you can. If you get the opportunity, I'd say from where you're at to where you need to present. For example, I presented on a Saturday, and I had a paper session that I was presenting, and then an hour after that was the roundtable session that I was presenting with somebody else. And so I just had to make sure that I could, I had some time, but sometimes it'll be back to back. So you just never know where you're at in the program. I think another big tip for me, and 2 big things, was you need to do whatever it is to make you feel confident in your presentation. So if that's practicing in front of other people, if that's practicing in front of the mirror, if that's practicing with distractions, because this is a round table, there will be a lot of conversations going on in a big room. So if you're not used to kind of the noise of that, you might want to prep yourself. So feel confident, do whatever you need to do to feel confident. And then the other part is being comfortable giving the presentation. So Jenny was the other presenter and myself. We, because we already had this relationship and we had been talking about the research, we were already comfortable with the information. So I think those are kind of the 2 big ones. And then also, I think another big point, and this is just generally not specific to roundtables, but I think it's important to find your speaking voice, your speaking style. I don't think you want to go in there and, if you're not if you're trying to mimic somebody else's style, it'll come off really awkward, So I think just find your speaking style, whatever it is, and stick with that. I'd say don't get too hung up on specific words, but you should know what you're talking about. But I think those are some things that come to mind. Yep.
Thanks, Jeremiah. And like Shayna, you jumped around to the tips, and we appreciate it. So another question is specifically kind of the logistics, and you guys kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you could just maybe go through a little bit more, what are the logistics for the sessions, if you felt like there's anything that you didn't address prior. And for those of you who are following along with the PowerPoint, this information can be found on slides 8 through 10. So Eric, why don't we start with you?
I think one thing too, before logistics, is just the timeline, the general AERA timeline. It's on slide 6. And I'll go through it really quickly and then follow up with logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So the call for reviewers of proposals comes out in May. The call for proposals generally comes out in July. And the proposal acceptance or rejection, everyone should have just received something. It goes out typically in November. one thing to look for in early December, like any day, is the registration and housing. And there was a warning on the AER website about false registration, like companies reaching out to AERA attendees, and they were not the official AERA site. So keep a lookout for the official AERA registration and housing any day, so in early December. And this goes, so the program, the online program, comes out in February. Molly, I think that's the question that you had asked in the chat box. But everyone in February, you should know what time you're presenting, what day, and where. And then the annual meetings in April.
Information that Eric provided just about the general location, the length of time, and all of that information that's located in the brochure, that's applicable to all of the sessions for sure.
Correct.
Yeah. And also the other thing that I kind of like blew right past is that for those who have been accepted, you are required, I like put it in quotes because you already technically uploaded a paper, but in order for you to have like an updated paper for the session, you have to upload it by, and I thank you, Eric, for putting it there, March 8th. So, and that's not like something like you have to do it or they're going to drop you from the session. It's just to update what you already have submitted. So if you don't make that deadline, they're just going to use the proposal you submitted or whatever paper you had sitting in there. So something to also keep in mind, if your paper is, good to go, in good condition, in good shape, and you feel good about it, put it in there. Or even if you don't, because this is also an opportunity for you to get a lot of good feedback on your work. So, it could go either way. And the idea of these sessions, as we all know, is to get our work seen, heard, and shared with folks, but also to prepare it for publication, right? So we're writing these papers, presenting, and then the idea is at the end of the day, we'll be able to submit it to AERJ, to, all these different peer-reviewed journals and get a publication out of it.
So one question that we have, and I just want to throw it out there now since we're kind of talking about it, is the March date for roundtables, the March 8th date, the same for roundtables as well?
Yes, it's for everyone. Mm-hmm. So just keep that in mind.
It's very relative I think it's more relative for papers. I mean, it is for everyone, but it's more relative because for papers, I don't know, I like to provide the discussion and share with the full paper if it changes.
Yeah.
I haven't really done that as much with roundtables.
Oh, that's a good point. And I don't know about posters, actually. I should just say like the paper sessions. But again, it's these sessions are like, you will get out of it what you put into it, right? So if your paper is in a space where you're like, I feel like it's good, like what I submitted back in July is what I'm going to present in the following April, then that's kind of like what you'll get out of it is it's what you put in. And so, but if you've updated it and tweaked it and you really want the discussant to and the chair to talk about those updates, then put it in so that you can make sure that the paper that you're presenting is relevant to the paper that you submitted, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, when the online searchable program becomes available in February, you can use it to search by day, time, by person, by room, by division or SIG, by session type or descriptor. So you can play around with the program when it comes out to see which sessions you want to attend. And I would encourage people to download the AERA app too, because you can use the app to look at the online schedule. You can use it to schedule which sessions you want to attend, and it's really useful.
Just a real quick note about the app. It tends to drain your battery a lot just because it's a big thing. So just keep that in mind. I used the app and it was really helpful, but it did drain my battery a lot. So if you have like an extra portable charger, or just bring a charger.
And the other thing on the timeline, sorry, one more date to throw out there is March 1st. So, you know, in addition to you updating your paper and sending it or sending whatever final paper you have, it's a different date because this is the date that you have to submit all of the changes AERA by in order for it to be included in the program. So if Jeremiah and I were writing a paper together and then we decided like, oh, Eric should hop on this paper and we want to add him as an author or we want to change the title or whatever, we would make these changes by March 1st. So just keep those two dates in mind as you work towards, you know, your presentation.
Okay. So we've talked about the general format. We've gone through recommendations, the logistics, the timeline. Do you have any tips, specific tips for first-time presenters? And I know you guys have kind of mentioned some general tips and just becoming familiar with your presenting style, but is there anything else that you want to highlight for first-time presenters specifically?
I want to go back to something Jeremiah said that I just like really loved about finding your voice. And I think this is something that I, in the very beginning was really nervous about because, you know, hello, imposter syndrome. For a long time, I didn't really feel like I was like a legitimate academic and like these spaces were just kind of so foreign to me, you know, being a first gen and like all these other identity things that you come into these spaces with. And it's not going to be, you know, perfect every time, and just to also go easy on yourself when it doesn't, you know, pan out the way you want it to. And it always is better than what you imagined it in your head. You know, we're always so much harder on ourselves. And I think going into like, you will only get better with this by like practice. And so, and the only, like the best practice is like actually playing the game, right? And so like going out there and presenting. And so between, this is not really AERA specific, but even between AERAs, like presenting at smaller conferences and really like honing and like really nurturing your voice, I think is like a really great thing that Jeremiah talked about, because, you know, you don't want to be just like a replication of somebody else. You want to be you because you have so much to contribute. And so I think when you go up there and present, like find comfort in knowing that like you are you, and like this knowledge that you have makes you an expert and makes you an authority in the field. And it's I think as grad students, especially grad students, as we work under or for somebody else who's like the voice in the field, it's hard for us to kind of remember that when we're presenting. So that's really helped me a lot, is just like presenting in smaller venues, smaller spaces. But even like at AERA, walking in and remembering like, yeah, I belong here and this is my voice and this is who I am, is like, it is important. And there's a difference between like, you know, humbly being confident and then like bragging. So just also knowing that like, you know, that's also like important.
Thank you, Shana.
I can throw one out there too. I mentioned it previously about finding your division or your SIG. I think it's important to consider how you want to position yourself within this big AERA community, because if you just go in there without thinking about that, it's really difficult to make connections. So there are just so many people and they're so busy. Yeah, find your crew and you know, position yourself around people that you want to interact with. And you know, this is something that I'm terrible at, but networking in that circle and bringing business cards and promoting yourself, yeah, it's something that I need to get better at for sure.
Yes, that's a great tip. But also
Find your voice and find your crew.
That's right. And to Eric's point, I also think like, in addition to that, like AERA is a space, like an opportunity for you, like actually like Jeremiah, Eric, Isha, and I consider them my friends. Like we work together, but like come AERA, I'm trying to go to everybody's session. Like, you know, the way you get better is you also keep in company with people who are going to push you and inspire you. And I think like when I see my colleague is on the program and they're speaking and they're like, you know, close to me, or like it's a good time for me to go and see them, like support your people and you know, ask, you know, engage in their work, ask questions. And I think that's also a part of AERA. It's not just like you going in and presenting your work and then like being exhausted, but also going in and receiving the work of others and engaging in that. It's really important.
What's great about AERA is that they also offer a lot of great networking opportunities, and a lot of these divisions host receptions. So I would say pinpoint which receptions you want to go to, because usually they provide food as well. Some of these, like Division G, combined with another division, I think it was Division K last year, I don't remember. But these two divisions came together, provided free food, drinks, and it's really good free food and drinks. So I'd say make it a point to identify which of those receptions you want to attend, because that's a really great opportunity to network with other people. Is finding those receptions. And like Shane and Eric have said, I think you just got to find your crew, get involved. So, this is not, well, I guess it's a plug for Division G, but I think Division G was a really good place for me to find a community of scholars, graduate students, who helped kind of develop my own confidence and comfortability with getting into an ARA. I think without this supportive community, I still am intimidated, but I think it helps to know that there are people there that you're working with, that you've spoken with, and you can work together with. So I think definitely getting involved, not just during ARA, but if you're interested in like Division G, get involved with us. We have campus liaisons, and that's kind of what our committee does, is trying to facilitate some of these discussions and networking opportunities and all the different things that grad students need from in between these big annual meetings. So I'd say if you're interested in what we're about and what you're hearing, then I'd say email us and get involved, because that definitely helps a lot.
So shout out to Jeremiah for doing the plug for me instead of waiting to the end. I appreciate it. We have Find Your Voice, Find Your Crew, and Find the Food at the receptions. Do you guys have any, last tips, anything that you wish someone would have told you about presenting, just any other information that you want to throw out there before we open up to questions?
Prepare for the Q&A. So just make sure, as much as you're prepared in terms of giving your presentation, that you're also in whatever way you're comfortable and feel like you can best prepare. And you're not going to be able to anticipate, right, every single question or even critique, but just seeing like where people might be the most curious about your work, or think a little bit more different than you or critically, and that's totally fine. But just, I think being prepared to answer some big questions about your work will help ease kind of like the nerves around it. But also being open, because sometimes there are no immediate answers. Like I said, you can't anticipate all the questions, but then there are also no immediate answers. Sometimes they're not immediate answers to the types of questions that are being asked. And just knowing how to kind of, finesse your answer around that without, coming across like unprepared, because you're not. And really making sure that you're communicating how thoughtful you're being about this work and moving it forward. So the Q&A is a big part, at least for the paper session. I know definitely also for the roundtable, because there's discussion, more discussion style rather than Q&A. But for the paper session, I know I've seen a lot of folks, and again, usually people aren't there to like tear your work apart or go after you, but you do get some, I've seen some like pretty like tense moments where questions get asked. And so I think it's just important to also like think about and then prepare for the Q&A portion of it.
Thank you, Shana. I think that's really important, not to forget about that part. We tend to think about just presenting the information, but we don't think about how the audience is going to think about this information and the questions that they may have. So absolutely prepare for that. Eric, Jeremiah?
Some advice that I got recently this past year was try to organize your own session. So whether it's a paper session or a roundtable, shoot for the moon. The advice that I got was, if you're doing comps or proposal or whoever you're reading, if there's some existing literature, pick out some people that you would like to read your work, or pick out some some scholars that you would like to potentially work with. And if you have something that's in a similar space, then try to organize something with them. It's a good way to make connections.
Yeah, I'd also say the same thing. I found, I was interested in indigenous peoples of the Pacific SIG, and a lot of the work that I was doing, there were other scholars involved as well, and so I was citing them, and they were also present in this paper presentation. And so I made it a point to talk with them, and I still sometimes text them, right? So I think that's another cool thing about SIG, the smaller groups, is if you're really into specialized things, you can connect with folks. And then one of the scholars that I cite in my papers, who I really look up to, his niece was one of the chairs of the SIG, and so we got to connect and talk over dinner. And I met other grad students that she knew, kind of doing similar work to what I was doing. So you just never know, who you're gonna meet. You have a list of folks that you want to meet, but I think the opportunities there are awesome. So I say take advantage of that. You're spending a lot of money, all right? So even if you're one of those people who are more reserved and not the networking type, I would say push yourself to do it. And then if you need help, ask your advisor, ask your chair, ask other grad students for tips. But I think that's really important.
I would agree. All right, thank you. So for more information about today's speakers, please visit our Division G blog on WordPress. That's where you can find all of our pictures, all of our information, more information about what we're interested in and our research interests. So feel free to reach out to us. We are absolutely a resource to you. Remember to follow us on Twitter and Facebook for updates and our monthly webinars and other Division G related activities. Okay, the pre-con on April 5th is titled Paths and Purpose and Inner Peace by Dr. Patel, and Dr. Patel will be the keynote speaker. Division G is hosting a community project for books for Detroit students, so please visit the Division G blog for WordPress for links to that book list. So those are our plugs for today.
Going through real quick, there was one question about, I wish this person would ask it again. Do y'all see that? I saw it and I was like, we should answer this question.
This is about recommendations for professional development sessions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think definitely the pre-con is one of them. If y'all aren't familiar, our pre-con session takes place the day before, or the day of AERA kickoff. This year it's going to be on Friday, and it's a morning time session. So it's going to be from 7:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. and it's a mentoring session with different faculty members. So Dr. Patel is our keynote speaker, but we'll have other faculty, junior faculty, senior faculty, all across the board coming and doing these mentor sessions. And you don't want to miss out, because this is a really good opportunity to have that one-on-one time with faculty members. Some you might, look up to, and I feel like I'm releasing a secret, we're going to drop a mixtape. It's you're going to be so excited when you see this list of faculty members who have confirmed. But yeah, so I recommend that you apply to just have this opportunity to be mentored in that space, but also to meet other grad students and to kind of take the time right before things get hectic and you run off into your different sessions to really get lifted up and be given lots of really good, solid advice for continuing in this work. So
we have one question. Thank you, Shana. We have one question about a page limit for papers. Are you aware of a page limit on your paper, or should they think about that in specifics to the journal that they would like to publish in?
I would say the latter, but I'll let Eric and Jeremiah.
I'm not aware of a page limit either. I would also say the latter.
Yeah, Eliana just wrote, I think it might depend, page limit might depend on the journal you want to submit to.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about the journal you're submitting to, usually, a lot of people AERJ, because that's the AERA, then you want to submit to AERJ. But if you're thinking about it for a different journal, I would say just prep your manuscript for that journal. Because again, these are opportunities for people to cite your work in like, you know, these presentations. But also it's an opportunity for you to like talk about it and like get it ready. So it's not like the final version. But people will be citing it. Like, you know, I've had, you know, folks like ask me about my paper, like when can they cite it? And I'm like, you know, you can actually cite the actual the AERA presentation, if you like have a presentation that you find very useful for your work.
Yeah, so I'd say after you present your paper, like you definitely want to make sure that even if you're not submitting it to a journal in AERA, that you definitely try to submit it somewhere. Because I've had a couple of text messages saying, hey, did you publish this anywhere? Because I want to cite your work. And I'm like, oh, dang, not yet, but it's coming soon, right? And it's been a year since then. So I think definitely work on that as soon as you can, because I think if people love your work, they're going to want to cite it. So.
And I think you make a great point, Jeremiah, about doing it as soon as you can, you know, right in that moment, in that space, you're getting all of these feedbacks, you're considering all of these questions. So you want to go back to wherever you came from and take that information and take a moment and try to just go back into that paper and do it then. Because as we know, life gets busy. It's a year later and wow, this person had this really great point, the feedback, and it just may not be as fresh. So absolutely doing it right away while it's fresh in your head, I think is important. Anything else?
Denise also had a question about tips for getting accepted or resources on how to submit to AERA. And I'm going to give a shout out to my local Arizona State campus liaison group. They have a webinar every year that usually we send out the link, we share it with everyone. It's typically in May or June that we give tips about how to write your proposal and tips about getting in. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of any other groups that give that type of proposal or webinar.
Oh, most of my information has come from past grad students who have gone to AERA. So.
Yeah, I don't know of any webinar necessarily. That's a really great potential webinar that we could, I think, our division exec committee could take up. So thank you for identifying what sounds like a need. But I think in the past, what's worked for me, and what I've done also, like just kind of to help other people along with their process, is I have asked folks who have had their proposals accepted to share their proposal with me, and then I kind of identify the structure of like what the general structure is of all these proposals, like what they have in common. But also it's really great to read other people's proposals to, you know, find inspiration for how like you want to, again, like present your voice, present your work. So yeah, the best thing to do right now would be, until we get our webinar up and running with all these great tips, would be to ask folks, and if you don't know anybody who's been accepted, now you know 3 people who've been accepted, and you know, and our email addresses are online, and we're here as a resource for all of our fellow grad students in this work. So, you know, feel free to hit us up, reach out, and we'll be happy to kind of share our knowledge and tips. And I'm always happy to share my, you know, my proposal or my template for what a proposal looks like.
This is just another random thing that I remembered, but you never know what the weather's going to be like. So you just want to make sure that you're prepared. When I went to New York last year's conference, it rained like it was under the water. And I was soaked halfway through, even with an umbrella. So, you know, just be prepared for the weather. It's probably going to be really cold. Isha knows, right? Yeah, so just another random tip.
Yes, just for the cold, because it likely will be in Canada in April. Any suggestions around APA format? Likely it's what the readers and people will want to see or expect to see for the papers.
Yeah, APA citation for sure. I I don't know if I've ever seen Chicago. Have y'all ever seen Chicago? I always see APA. And I use APA, like that's just my go-to. I use Zotero as my number one kind of like library citation guide. So I'm always APA compliant. Oh, Lori just said history uses Chicago. Oh, hey, Lori. I see you, Lori. Lori's in GSC with me. Uses Chicago and APA. So if you're in history, you can use Chicago.
Good to know. Yeah, we had a question about APA format, which is why I threw it out there.
Yeah.
Right, you guys have some really good questions.
Yeah, and in your presentations, make sure you're citing your work too. Like in your slides, it's always, I think, good to just like throw it up there. One, to show them that like you know, this is not your original idea, and like you're not, you know, but also too that like you know the scholarship around this topic, and you know, again, this is like one of my favorite things is like this is your time to show off, and like not in like a bragging kind of way again, but just like to really show that you know your stuff. And so citing is definitely one of those ways to do it. Oh, this is a good time to read suggestions. So Janet says, don't be intimidated in paper sessions if someone asks you something you don't know. Just say, that's a great question and something that I can certainly research in the future studies. I love that suggestion because sometimes like I get like kind of like frozen when somebody asks me something that's like either like really far like out in left field that has nothing to do with my work, but they feel it's like super relevant. So, you know, I always say like, and then you have these questions that aren't really questions, but they're like critique or suggestions couched in questions.
Yes.
So you never really know what to do because you're not answering it isn't really the point. So again, just acknowledging the person, saying you hear them and you thank them for, you know, engaging with you in that moment. And if it's useful for you, carry it with you. If it's not, keep it moving.
So Lori's suggestion is to be a volunteer, to be a reviewer for a division or SIG. I volunteered before I actually, accepted, and it helped a lot. She's also been reviewing for several years for Division F, Caribbean and African Studies, etc. So I would definitely agree with Lori's comments. Last year was my first year at AERA, and I volunteered, I believe, to do a roundtable to be the reviewer, timekeeper. I'm forgetting the actual term for that person, but it was really, really helpful. It helped me understand what the expectations were, but also just kind of how it goes, and it forced me to engage in a way that I could actually learn. So I would definitely agree with Lori's comments and her recommendation. Bring business cards. Yes, so important. Lori, you are absolutely correct. Very, very, very important. With the networking, you have to have your business card. Get their info and you give it to them as well too. Very important. Janet Hansen, she mentioned that the poster session sometimes can be lonely, especially if you don't have people stopping by. I've definitely been in that situation, being a poster presentation and no one at my poster. I would say just smile, say hello as people walk by, make yourself inviting. And as always, take it as an opportunity to go and see the posters and offer support.
Oh, that's a good suggestion, Eric. Bring the dongle. Adapters. One time I brought an extension cord just because I know that sometimes a projector and the outlet and your computer is just, the space is off. So I actually made a couple of friends bringing an extension cord. A good networking opportunity too. No.
Yeah.
But
Don't assume they'll have what you need. So bring everything you need. I think that's a great point, Jeremiah.
Sure, this goes without saying, but don't forget to have fun too. You know, get out there a little bit too.
Yes,
yeah,
I would absolutely agree. Take this opportunity, network, see what's going on, get to know as many people, and yes, have fun. I feel like conferences are, as a student, that's my favorite time to go out and have fun. It's learning in a different way, if you will. So again, thank you guys for your time. We're going to go ahead and wrap up, get your weekend started, and see you guys at AERA. I think it's going to be a great time. Thanks again. Bye-bye.